Hello? Anyone running around up here? I heard you. You can come out. Come on, don't be... What the... I spy. Oh, hey, Damien. You want to do this I Spy book with me? Oh yeah, that's it! You found it, Damien! Nice work, big guy! This is shaping up to be the greatest Halloween ever!
Enter if you dare. You're in for a scare.
Oh, it's Halloween once again, and I'm certainly feeling it this year. I've got a hankering for some classic October traditions of mine, such as watching old horror movies, finding some spooky games to play, even reading entries in a quasi-educational search and find book series made for ages 3 and up. I've found that last one to be the most alienating to people. It's I Spy. Everybody knows I Spy, though for those out there who don't, allow me to explain the rules. You see this apple? Is the answer yes?
Well then you win! You won, I Spy! You did it! You won the game!
Yeah, it's about as bare bones as you can get. It dates back to being just a verbal game people would play on long road trips to keep themselves entertained, asking those they're with if they can guess what was being spied by giving some basic clues to describe whatever they may be driving past. I spy with my little eye something brown. Nope, you got me, Uncle Ray. It is the world's largest pecan again. Yeah, I know it doesn't exactly sound like a thrill ride, but before phones, people had to find some way to avoid having an actual conversation with their families. In the late 80s, the widespread success of Where's Waldo certainly proved that there was an appetite for the idea of making books about a particular point of interest on a visually busy page. The objective is so instantly engaging, transcending languages and naturally satiating our innate human need to bring patterns to conclusion. We know Waldo was on the last page, but where is he on this page? I'll find him, just give me a sec. It didn't take long after for others to throw their hat in the ring and take the concept even further. That brings us to a man named Walter Wick, who, if you've ever even skimmed through an I Spy book, you're already familiar with the work of. Wick was a commercial photographer out of New York City who was finding success with his distinctively puzzling photographs. He would often get his work published in magazines, eventually being how he caught the eye of the late Gene Marzullo, a children's author and illustrator. The two would begin working together on smaller projects, such as posters, before being approached by school book fair juggernaut Scholastic, who would commission the pair to come together and work on a series of search and find books. These publications would utilize Wick's skillful eye for creating detailed and extensive scenes using his endless collection of props, sets, and toys, as well as Marzullo's writing and ability to shape the photos into a cohesive and readable format. In 1992, the first outing in the series, I Spy, a Book of Picture Riddles, was released to widespread praise and success. Wick's engrossing photography and Marzullo's accompanying rhyming lyrics being the recognizable staples that would lay the groundwork for the many future entries. Though, like anything that grows hugely successful within one medium, it's a matter of time before attempts are made to see if the same formula could work elsewhere. And if I'm not talking about the short-lived I Spy stop-motion children's show that was canceled after one season.
Whoop! We found it! Whoop! We found it! Whoop! We found it! How about you?
Oh, no thank you. Then I must be talking about the video games. You know, it's not often that a children's book series turned game amounts to anything beyond a wet fart in the wind. But the idea does actually suit I Spy kinda perfectly. I mean, all you really have to do is take the books and let players interact with them using a mouse instead of their boring old fingers like some kind of a Neanderthal. Which is why I think these titles work best on PC, despite getting a few console ports here and there. And it seems most agreed. I found that a lot of people around my age have grown up with at least one of these classics, so I wanted to look back at each title they came out with on PC to learn if they've aged as well as we fondly remember, while also taking a peek at ones that maybe didn't garner as much attention. Now you might be asking yourself, how's Patrick going to possibly find something to say about each one of these similar titles? You're just finding hidden objects in every one, wouldn't that get redundant? Well, I guess you and I are going to find that out together, aren't we? Before we hop in, though, I thought I might get in the spirit of I Spy by presenting my own little challenge. Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Damien the Big Monkey. I've hidden Damien 25 times throughout this video at different spots. Some may have even popped up already. If you can spy all 25 of Damien's appearances, then I'll reward you with... Well, I haven't actually thought of it yet with all the Halloween celebrations going on. I tell you what. I'll come up with the prize while I'm editing this video and flash it up on screen for you right now. There you go. I'm sure whatever I decided on ought to tantalize you. Happy hunting! There's actually a healthy handful of these I Spy PC games, so I figure the best place to start would be the original. Released in 1997 and, like the rest of the series, developed by Scholastic and Black Hammer Productions, I Spy for CD-ROM was the very first I Spy game to ever be made. It was based on the first I Spy book, that of which it shares its title with, a practice that'll be continued by its sequels. For this video, I'll actually be playing the 2000 re-release, I Spy School Days, which is, for all intents and purposes, the same game with a few added bells and whistles. What you see is what you get. Limericks are written out at the bottom of the screen containing rhyming lists of things you're meant to find within the image. It's pretty much a one-to-one translation of how the book works, which, granted, isn't that complex of a concept to port over. Though still, it's commendable that everything they do add in serves to complement the foundation. There's some no-brainer additions, like having a narrator who reads out the limericks to you, but there are some others that feel a bit more inspired, like letting the player look for items by cycling through different perspectives on the same puzzle. It's enough to make the title stand out as its own experience from the original book, not to mention the quirky sound effects the game seems to be unapologetically flooded with.
A sailboat.
There's a few different puzzle themes you can try out, each with about 5 different remixed versions to solve. If you manage to find every hidden object on a screen, you're gifted with a treasure that you're now allowed to use in the Make Your Own I Spy game section. That's right, you're able to design your own images with whatever props you see fit. Though I wasn't really too invested in this mode. 1, because I'm embarrassingly old for this, and 2, I think this might be something more designed for if you have someone else to play with who would be willing to solve your homemade brain teasers. Shockingly, I found that everyone I knew was busy. That's not the only bonus game, however. There's some other neat distractions within this package, such as Oops Hoops, a matching game where you put the objects in the hoop they belong to. Well, I should think this won't be too much of a challenge for me.
Pick up the objects that are outside a hoop and drop them into a hoop with the same objects. But it's not that simple.
Forget it, I knew I couldn't handle it. But you know, it's fun enough and it keeps with the theme. Oh man, it really isn't that simple. The same goes for the others, like Balloon Popper, a Rube Goldberg machine of sorts you need to complete by finding a hidden item to add to it, or Codebreaker, one where you decipher a hidden message using the first letter of the objects you're given. Sometimes they throw you for a loop in the main puzzles too, and have you not only find the object to click on, but once you do, you need to move it to the right place as well. And I've never felt more in charge of my life. I even got to match up these chalk fruit drawings with the sliced versions of themselves on this one. That wasn't even part of the riddle, I'm just showing off. You can also find 12 toy ladybugs scattered across the screens for a hidden bonus. What does finding them all give you? Well, I'll let you know after I find this last one. Dear God, where is this thing? I feel like I'm going mad scanning all of these screens over and over. It's just, I know it's here. Don't look at me like that violin crab. Alright, I can feel my brain smoothening the longer I stay on this one, so let's move to the next title. One that I feel should be much more appropriately engaging for my own mental capacity. I Spy Jr. was released in 1999, serving as the go-to option for everyone's whiny little brother who was complaining he wanted to play too, but was too young to know what a thimble looked like.
I Spy Jr. Type your name on the line, then click the bunny to start the game.
You ever feel like you're making a fool of yourself? I actually chose to play this. What does that say about me and my own mental faculties that I'm still willing to...
Type your name on the line.
All right, I'm doing it. If the last game was for kids in grade school, this one's definitely for more of the preschool age. Things are simplified quite a bit, giving a picture of the object you're meant to find at the bottom of the screen for the very little kids to pretty much just locate them by matching it up. This isn't a bad idea, of course, making the entry level for I Spy not rely on knowing how to read. But maybe there could have been an older kid mode where we didn't have the pictures next to the words in case someone a little out of that 2 to 4 age range had nothing else to play, or was an adult making a video about it 25 years later, just a thought. Something I didn't mention in the last game, and I'm only mentioning here because what the hell else am I going to say about this one on its own? But the little musical cues when you find an object really do add a lot of charm. A game with no characters and only stationary screens could risk feeling a bit dry, especially to a young audience, but touches like that demonstrate a level of care, not to mention the little animations that play for each individual object to celebrate you finding it. It's a nice, playful atmosphere. We've got the returning side games too, like a simplified version of Oops Hoops, Make Your Own I Spy, and a pattern finishing game where you put the objects in the right order so that you can, you get it. For what it's setting out to do, it accomplishes, but not much else. I feel like there could have been some room made for maybe a few extra games, but we as a society will probably remain standing if this one's a bit thin. and a bit bossy.
Get to it. Look at this pattern.
While we're knocking this one out, let's take a look at its successor, I Spy Jr. Puppet Playhouse, this one being released in 2000. We're looking at a pretty similar setup here. Yeah, jeez, it's Halloween, remember? Almost forgot about that for 2 minutes. This one's pretty much what I felt the original Junior game could have been. The aesthetic is pretty focused, with it all being hand puppets and crafts, using the classic puppet show narrative structure as an excuse to make bite-sized stories that progress into one another each time you solve a riddle, giving a somewhat linear flow that would definitely be revisited down the line. It's hard not to be endeared by the young vocal cast playing these hand puppets too.
What a lovely day.
A king on his throne.
It meshes well with the spry and energized animations that keep things feeling like they have a pulse, even if they're stationary a majority of the time, when they're not being decked in the face amusingly hard by a ball, of course. There are still pictures next to the words to help out the younger kids, and most of the additional content does mimic what we've seen before with Make Your Own I Spy and matching games. Though there is this new Puppet Maker mode where the puppet will ask you for the items that it wants for its facial features.
I need carrot top hair.
I mean, I wouldn't, but you do you, sister. And it's time for things to get a bit more nautical for our next game, 2001's I Spy Treasure Hunt. Here's a setting that suits I Spy perfectly. What could be more apropos of meticulously hunting for hidden objects than to do so in a place primed for treasure hunting? We're aiming for a bit of a higher-aged demographic on this one, which is great for my self-esteem and also replayability. Instead of having the puzzles presented as segmented screens, this time they all exist within a defined world. An old sea town that you can explore at your pleasure. There's background music, but only in settings where it's suited. If we're outside, you get the sound of the nearby ocean or birds. The same rule applying for when we venture indoors. Though I admit, depending on the sound design, some of these screens can make me feel like a bit of a dunce while I stare at them for long periods of time. You guys see a balloon anywhere? All in all, this feels like a very solid evolution for these games, upping the challenge by making some of these objects miles harder to find in some places. They're not afraid to pull some cheeky tricks on occasion, or to spice things up visually. True to its nature, you get gifted a piece of a treasure map for each riddle you solve that leads to more puzzles and a longer playtime, both of which were starting to become subjects of concern for me with the previous titles. There's also a New Game Plus of sorts that you can do after beating the game the first time that sees you going through the same screens, tasked with finding all new items to keep things interesting. What we're losing in the variety we had from the side minigames, we're gaining much more in quality. The art style is very pleasing to look at, and the added audio elements I mentioned proved to be a detail I didn't realize I was missing. There's a new standard set for these games that I was pleased to see held up with the following entry, I Spy Fantasy in 2003. They were really hitting their stride here, taking an opportunity to test this format in a wider selection of settings, all landing under the fantasy genre. We've got medieval knights fighting dragons, space aliens and astronauts, and the ocean, which, outside of the mermaids, I thought was a real thing, not a fantasy. Oh well, I've been hunting for objects so long, I'll just believe whatever they tell me at this point. I feel it would be a disservice to all the hard work put into the visual design to say this one is pretty much the same game as prior. Explore the settings, solve riddles, find the spoon. But like the books they're based on, the fun is being given these new challenges and enjoying the artwork while you're at it. Personally, I'm a sucker for goofy, over-the-top sci-fi nonsense, so I spent a little extra time enjoying this one. This title turned out to be another home run, I feel. A spot-on port of the book it's based on that adds more flair to the presentation to enhance that I Spy feel. I was getting pretty excited to see how things would continue. 2006's I Spy Mystery would be next on the docket, and at first glance, well, looks like the mystery theme had them the most inspired by far. We've got some wide variety going on here. There's a whole seaside town and a rocket ship and medieval knights and dragons. What's going on here? This is just all riddles from the previous few games slapped together. Even the objects you find are unchanged. I just played this. Well, that's a bit of a letdown. And here I thought with the mystery angle we would be getting some fun new challenges, like having to find the hidden zebra at the murder scene or a teapot at the morgue. The only mystery here is how they thought they'd get away with shamelessly recycling old content. I mean, if this title was called something like The Best of I Spy, then I feel it might have been appropriate. But nothing I can see from the promotional material or packaging makes any reference to the fact that this is all old stuff. It's like when a sitcom does a flashback episode to a bunch of older episodes. What did the writers take off for this one? The riddles are separated into case files by a loose theme they share, but I really couldn't be bothered to get too far on this one, especially coming right off of the previous games. I mean, they used this one screen twice in 2 different case files. How do you do that? I sure hope no I Spy fans were severely disappointed by this little bait and switch back in the day. I mean, my God, is Congress even doing anything about this madness? Well, at least I didn't have to wait long for things to get back to how they were. 2008's I Spy Funhouse returns to the familiar formula with a thankfully new motif, one that complements the hectic nature of these puzzles by being in itself a celebration of visual oddities. I really like the look of Funhouse, even if this guy over here on the bench was making me a bit depressed. Looks like somebody played I Spy Mystery. It's the carnival this time, which comes with all the usual trappings. Solving these riddles gives you tickets to the funhouse itself that contains more puzzles you can do, akin to the bonus games you can find in the earlier entries and feeling somewhat like a return to form. Helping make for another solid I Spy experience, and one that I'm glad I got to try out for the first time. And you know, with these well-crafted backgrounds and calming atmosphere, I find myself having quite the cozy time getting through these titles. The idea of maybe staying in on some rainy evening with a warm hot chocolate and spending an hour or two playing I Spy on the computer, well, I don't mind saying, makes me feel like I'm engaging in somewhat of an intellectual pursuit. Where is that damn last rusty nail I've been looking for 15 minutes here? Alright, maybe we better move things along. I'm starting to get a bit agitated doing all of these puzzles one after another. I guess in a way, I kinda got a break with the next 2 titles. 2014's I Spy Challenger and 2015's I Spy Pirate Ship. Both titles that, through different circumstances, are now considered lost media. In the case of Challenger, it was delisted off the Microsoft Store a few years back, with only some screenshots left to demonstrate what the game was like. I can't even find anyone online who has footage of this one, which is a shame since it looked to be shaking up the formula quite a bit with some multiplayer games thrown in the mix. There are other ports of I Spy Challenger out there, like the one for the Game Boy Advance, or for the hardcore gamers, the Leapfrog Leapster, but these were clearly different experiences. As for I Spy Pirate Ship, well, this one's lost for a much dumber reason. You see, you can still get Pirate Ship to play, unofficially at least, but you won't get very far. In order to access literally any of the gameplay, the game needs to recognize that you're using an Intel RealSense 3D camera. Well, I spy with my little eye, something I'm not going to buy. Thanks to the YouTube user Roamer Monkey, there does at least exist footage of this title for those curious. Apparently, that super necessary Intel camera is only really utilized for some minigames and ultimately ends up feeling like a tacked-on afterthought that completely crushed this game's chances of reaching any wide audience. And thus, as of now, this is the final I Spy PC game to be released, ending on a bit of a whimper here it seems. But I did save one title for last, the big kahuna as it were, and the I Spy game that almost everyone thinks of when the subject is brought up. Also the reason I made this a Halloween special to begin with. Oops. That's right, it's I Spy Spooky Mansion, released in 1999, with a deluxe version that came out in 2004, which is the release we'll be looking at today. Out of the whole series, this one made the biggest splash, probably due to its very fun and well-realized spooky aesthetic being not only interesting for kids, but intriguing for adults as well. Oh, I mean, this game is just dripping with horror atmosphere, from the creaky floorboards to the eerily distant organ music, to even the sounds of close-up footsteps coming up from behind. I'm getting some chills. Please don't sneak up on me, I'm looking for an ice skate. I mean, even just standing in the mansion foyer is enough to let that sweet nostalgia come rushing back. Now, since this originally came out in '99, it predates even I Spy Treasure Hunt, meaning Spooky Mansion was actually the first game to introduce what would go on to be the core design of this series for years to come, solving the riddles and being rewarded with a piece of a larger puzzle with each success, then using those pieces to help bring on more puzzles and continue the cycle. It has everything that worked about all the other entries while being the very first to even try it, among some other things that weren't tried again. Like having an actual character on screen playing the part of the narrator, being this adorable little skeleton with a raspy voice.
Too bad you can't get out the way you came in. There's another way out.
Yeah, I know, I could just hit that big red stop button in the corner, but I'll play along. I know personally for me, this is the one I had growing up, so every single screen was a treat to get to revisit. And while I didn't quite remember where the objects were, nothing beats that dopamine hit of seeing something you vaguely recognize from years past that unlocks a ton of memories. Perhaps my fried brain is doing a bit of overanalyzing here, but I feel a lot of the appeal of this one, opposed to the follow-ups, is the feeling of actually being trapped in the location we're in. Other outings in the series just having us solve riddles for the fun of it. But here, there's an albeit faint, element of danger that perhaps makes the unsettling atmosphere all the more poignant. Or maybe we just like to get spooked with a silly little skeleton. What do I know? I haven't blinked in the last hour. But finishing this one out concludes our little I Spy PC game journey. As far as the brand goes, unfortunately, author Gene Marzolo would sadly pass away in 2018, though Walter Wick still finds himself tinkering away at his studio, working on book series of his own creation, such as Can You See What I See and Hey Seymour, both making great use out of his iconic talent for photography and illustrations. There's a genuine feeling that goes with reading I Spy books that tells you what you're looking at was made with a lot of talent and a lot of heart. How easy would it be to just digitally throw a bunch of objects together onto a series of pages and mass-produce these things? To actually set the riddles up with real props and objects adds a sense of depth to each picture that is nothing less than mesmerizing, making it easy enough to get lost in, but having something you're meant to find while lost being all the better. Though these PC games don't technically have all those pros going for them, it's for good reason that a lot of people can still bring them to the front of their minds after so many years. When a concept is this strong and inviting, it's hard to mess up, unless you want to. Being based on pre-existing books, I can see how some might claim that these games don't exactly do anything too original on their own, and may come off like they're merely riding the wave of I Spy's success. But I think there's a bit more to it than that. These games are greater than just ports. They're independent ways to experience the fun of I Spy without losing anything in translation. It's very possible some might only be familiar with the brand through playing these, and if that were to be the case, I don't think those people would be missing out on too much. Simple, yes, but significant, even more so. If you haven't gotten to try these titles out, or even the books, do yourself a favor and grab one, or get one for a kid you know. You might just discover something really worth finding. Another I Spy book completed. Nice work, Damien. Damien? What are you doing over there, Damien? Hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm sorry, Damien. Clearly you're just cutting up some bananas for your low-fat fruit smoothie. Another classic horror-themed misunderstanding. Always happens to me this time of year. See you all next spooky season for when I talk about a Medea Halloween or some dumb shit like that.